This is a video talking about Hamlet Act IV. It's the good parts edition because we skip part of this act. Now, in my class, we skip it because, in part because of time, but also because some of the act is real simple action that we can talk through. Some is repetition of things that have come in other places or will come in other places. And some is just a little more confusing than it is useful. Now, to look at these scenes specifically, there are 7 scenes in Act 4. The first 2 scenes we will breeze through quickly and sort of tell the story and eliminate them. Scene 3, there is an important soliloquy. It does come up later. It is explained again a little bit later. But here is where it shows up initially, and I want to talk about that. Scenes 4, 5, and 6 we will breeze through quickly mainly because of the sort of extra effort involved in understanding some of the subtleties that are not necessary for us at this point in our study. Scene 7, there's a murder plot in scene 7. We will skip a bunch of scene 7, but we will talk about the murder plot because that's fairly relevant for the tragic, bloody, and tragically bloody ending of the play. So at this point, we know that Hamlet, who has wanted to kill Claudius for some time now to get revenge, has actually turned a corner and is ready to commit the murder now. He wanted to kill Claudius when Claudius was praying. He decided not to. Instead, he wants to send him to hell, catch him when he's doing something naughty, inappropriate. Meanwhile, Claudius wants to kill Hamlet. We know this from Claudius listening in to Hamlet and getting the wrong impression from the speech that he said, the to be or not to be speech. Now, when we see Hamlet talking with his mother in the bedroom, we actually get to see Hamlet kill somebody, thinking it's Claudius, thinking he's killing him, doing something sneaky, but instead it's Polonius. Now, Polonius is nasty and mean and horrible, but technically he shouldn't really be killed. And now Polonius has these 2 kids, Ophelia and Laertes. In this scene, in this act, we get to see that Ophelia, who we've anticipated being crushed like a bug among all these big, mean, selfish men, it happens. And Laertes, well, he's a big, sort of mean, selfish man in this scene. He gets ticked off and he wants to figure out a way to kill Hamlet. Now, these are things that happen later in the scene. Let's begin with a rapid fire through these first couple of action events. Scene 1, Gertrude has seen Polonius get killed by Hamlet, and she informs Claudius, and Claudius sends Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to go and find Hamlet and to get the body too, the body to the chapel. The next scene, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern find Hamlet and talk with him, and he's acting a little bit crazy and mad, and he says, he can keep his own secrets, and he runs off babbling about where the body is. Scene 3, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have brought Hamlet to Claudius. They finally catch him, and Claudius explains to Hamlet that he really needs to send him to England now for his own safety. Now that he's a murderer, he says, I can't necessarily protect you anymore. I'll have to do some work to figure out what to do about this situation. So you have to go to England now. And Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, here are your sealed letters. You take him to England. Okay? Now, after he sends them away, Claudius has a brief soliloquy where he clarifies what it is that is going to happen to Hamlet in England. Now, just to let you know about something that doesn't always come out, it isn't always the most obvious thing. Claudius the King of Denmark actually owns England. Okay, at this time in history, the Danes actually own they rule over England. England is a colony of Denmark at this point, so he can command the ruler of England to perform this execution that he doesn't really want to do at home. He doesn't want to kill Hamlet in the presence of Hamlet's mother, in the presence of all the citizenry. He wants to have it done over there where he can sort of blame someone else. And this is where he says it. Okay? In these lines right here, he is in soliloquy because Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have left. Okay? And he says, England, if my love thou holdest at aught, as my great power thereof shall give thee sense, okay, since I am the boss of you, I think it's true that you love me, okay? He says, because of that, thou, England, thou mayest not coldly set our sovereign process, which imports at full by letters congruing to that effect the present death of Hamlet. England, if you respect me, and you're supposed to, that means you can't delay in carrying out our sovereign process, our will, which is in the letters. Okay? And that our will is the present death of Hamlet. We want him killed presently. We want him immediately executed. Then do it, England, because I am scared as heck. Do it, England, for like the hectic in my blood he rages, and thou must cure me, till I know 'tis done. However my haps, my joys were ne'er begun. I cannot rest until this man has been executed. So, England, you get this done. Now, the next scene is another simple scene of action that it has a soliloquy in it, but that soliloquy is repetitive. It's something that Hamlet has already said in another time. The Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and Hamlet they're walking to the boat to get on the boat to go to England, and they run into the army of Fortinbras, or a captain of that army. And he says, yeah, we're passing through to get to Poland to attack this piece of land. And Hamlet then, after everyone leaves, they go to the boat. The captain goes on to Poland. Hamlet speaks of how he has again found an example of men eagerly carrying out great actions in a way that he himself can't seem to accomplish. Once again, I screwed up, and here's more. It's been shown to me again. Other people can succeed, and I am a miserable failure. Okay, and that happens on page 107 of our text, or it begins on page 107, 108. Okay? That brings us to scene 5. Now, scene 5 begins with Gertrude and Horatio encountering Ophelia, who has, as it says, lost herself in grief over her dead father and missing boyfriend. Now, interestingly, it is both of these characters show up in her madness. She is singing songs and making sort of dirty jokes and talking about flowers to both Gertrude and Horatio. And when Claudius comes in, she talks with him as well. In short, what she's doing is she talks about old men dying. So she's dealing with Polonius being dead, right? But she is also grieving the fact that that Hamlet has been she's been forbidden to see Hamlet. So she's lost her boyfriend, and now she's lost her dad. The fact that the one killed the other just seems to make it worse. That doesn't come out as much in what she's saying, but she definitely comments on the fact that old men die. She sings sort of songs about old men dying and being put in the ground. And then she sings some dirty songs about being seduced by an untrue lover, someone who's just taking advantage of her. So we see both of these things. The two men that have sort of bonked heads against each other have led to her being, as we has sort of predicted, being crushed in a sense. Yeah. After a bit of dealing with this broken woman, she leaves. She leaves the stage. Horatio goes after her to keep an eye on her, and Claudius bemoans the situation. He says that it's horrible that the that Polonius has been killed. Hamlet has been sent off to England. He's sort of in exile. Now this young woman is cracked, and on top of all of that, Laertes, the son of Polonius, is coming home, and he uh, is angry at me, Claudius says, for the death of his father. His father was died and then was buried quickly and quietly, and Laertes is angry at me for it. At this point, Laertes does burst into the room. He comes in and in the film that we watch, he actually has his sword and he's threatening the life of the king. And the king, whether or not there's a sword present, the king does say, when Gertrude freaks out, you're gonna hurt the king. The king says, no, Gertrude, a king is protected by more than just simple, simple rules of propriety. There's nothing he can do to kill the king. The king is protected by God. So go ahead, Laertes, and tell us what the problem is. And Laertes goes into great depth about how he's upset and angry that his father has been killed while King Claudius is in charge. So Claudius is to blame for this. And Claudius says, no, I'm not to blame. It's not me. It is someone else. I'll explain the whole thing to you. And in walks Claudius. In walks Ophelia, Laertes' sister. He sees what's gone on with her. He sees how she is broken, and it inflames him worse. Now, what's gone on? I need to be revenged. I need to blame someone for this. Revenge. Now, we've seen, just as a note, Ophelia is broken by love because she loves her father, she loves her Hamlet, and both of them have led to heartbreak. And now Laertes is motivated by revenge. So here are examples of both of the things that we've been talking about. Scene 6 is an interesting scene, not because of any action that goes on. All that happens is Horatio enters the stage and he's reading a letter that came to him from Hamlet. Hamlet has had time to write a letter and have it delivered by some sailors that have come back to England. And this is an interesting scene only because of the strange tools that Shakespeare himself used to tell his story. He wanted his Hamlet to go to England, go off to England, but not get killed there by Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. So how is he going to do that? How is he going to have them go off and probably get killed somehow, or go off and to their destruction, and have Hamlet come home? Let's see, what can I use? Shakespeare says to himself. What could possibly? I got it. Pirates. Yeah, pirates. Just so you know, as awkward as it seems, this is the tool that Shakespeare uses to get Hamlet to come home. Pirates have attacked them on the seas, and they captured Hamlet almost by accident, while the rest of the ship went on to England. So Hamlet has come home. He's on the island, and he has had some of these sailors, these pirates, deliver this letter to Horatio, saying, I'm home and I got to talk to you about what happened. That's scene 6. In scene 7, as Claudius and Laertes are discussing the realities of Polonius's death, the king has convinced Laertes that it's not his fault. It is, in fact, Hamlet's fault. And that was why he sent him to England, because he can't kill him. He can't do anything to punish him. He had to send him away. Now we know that when he sends him away, he's going to get killed. End of story. He can then tell Laertes, yeah, well, Hamlet died. Okay, so now the revenge is taken care of. So there's nothing more for you to do, Laertes. That's his plan. However, they receive a letter, just as Horatio did in the short scene before this. They receive a letter while talking that says Hamlet is on his way back. And so now Claudius needs to come up with a plan to deal with this. And he quickly comes up with the plan, which is elaborate and strange and bizarre, but a plan nonetheless. To understand this plan, first we have to hear Claudius talk about a visitor to his kingdom a while back. As he's talking with Laertes, he says, so this guy came and visited, and he was from the north of France, which is Normandy. So Laertes says, a Norman was it, this visitor? The king says, a Norman. Laertes, upon hearing the story, see, the king has told a little bit of a story about this guy and what he was like. And so when Laertes says, oh, upon my life, Lamond, he actually knows the guy that came to visit. Okay? So now the king says, yes, the very same. Now, once we establish that they're talking about a visitor, then let's hear what the visitor said about Laertes. It's important for the plan. Laertes says, I know him well. He's the brooch indeed, the gem of all the nation. King Claudius says, he made confession of you. He talked about you and gave you such masterly report for art and exercise in your defense, and for your rapier most especially. He cried out, 'twould be a sight indeed if one could match you. Okay, a rapier is a sword, and so the skill at your rapier is the skill of fencing. So this man came from France. He said, oh, this Laertes, he's an amazing fencer. He's amazing with swords. This Lamond, he went on to flatter Laertes a little bit. He said, the scrimmers of their nation, the people who scrimmage, are the scrimmers. You know, a scrimmage is playing a game, right? The scrimmers of their nation, he swore, had neither motion, guard, nor eye if you opposed them. If you, Laertes, fought against them, they always lost. Sir, this report of his did Hamlet so envenom with his envy that he could nothing do but wish and beg your sudden coming over to play with him. To play, to fence, to not duel, but play swords. Okay? Now, this seems awkward to us, but I suppose maybe some of you fence. I'm not sure. But generally, fencing seems like a dangerous thing to do. It's playing with swords. But if you do it right, if you have the correct swords, that they're not sharp on the points, and you have rules that you play by, it's no more dangerous than something equally bizarre, say, boxing. Okay? If we think of this as boxing, then it suddenly seems less unusual. Can you get hurt boxing? Yes. Is boxing sort of a brutal and harsh sport? Yes. But people like to do it. That's what we're looking at here. So, Laertes says, yeah, so what about it? King says, all right, let's get to the point. Was your father dear to you? Or are you like the painting of sorrow, face without a fear? Laertes says, oh, why ask me this? Okay. The king says, not because I think you did not love your father, but I know that love is begun by time, and that I see in passages of proof. Time qualifies the spark and fire of it. There lives within the very flame of love a kind of wick or snuff that will abate it. And nothing is at a like goodness still, for goodness growing to a pleurisy dies in its own too much. That we would do, we should do when we would. For this would changes and hath abatements and delays, and as many as there are tongues, are hands, are accidents. Now, let's deal with what he's saying here to start with. He's saying, I don't doubt that you loved your father. I actually believe it. I'm just asking you because I know that there are times when love is begun, when love seems strong, but then time actually qualifies it. It makes it different. Okay? Sometimes love is changed in this way. It's snuffed out or abated. If you really love someone, it kind of fades over time. Okay? And it doesn't last. Now, note here, this is kind of what we have been seeing in Hamlet. He was eager to begin with, but then it seems to have faded. Okay? His eagerness to revenge his father's death has faded away. So perhaps that's what he's speaking of. I don't know. But it's a true thing. We can say that it comes true in the play. Okay. Then he goes on. He says, goodness growing to a pleurisy dies in its own too much. It's sort of like too much love, fades over time. Then he says this sort of strangely phrased thing that makes sense if you think of older styled English. That we would do, we should do when we would. The things that we want to do, we really should do when we want to do them. Because this want changes over time. There are abatements, there are delays, there are things that slow down our eagerness to do something. Therefore, this should is like a spendthrift sigh. If you should do it, you kind of can get around to it. And it's eased over time. But, to the quick of the ulcer, okay, this is what I want to talk about. Hamlet's coming back. Now, if you really love your father, this is the time to get your revenge. This is when you should act. Now, right away, immediately. And in fact, that fits with Hamlet. Hamlet has slowed down his eagerness and is now less aggressive about his revenge. Just recently now, we've seen that he's okay now. He's ready to go. But it took a while. Okay? Now, let's look at the phrase, at the question here that Claudius asks. Because this is phrased kind of nicely. He says, what would you undertake to show yourself your father's son in deed more than in words? What would you do to prove that you are your father's son, that you really loved him? And he says, to cut his throat in the church. Not his father's throat, his murderer's throat. To this the king says, okay, we shouldn't give refuge to murder. No place should murder sanctuarize. Revenge should have no bounds. The murder of Polonius should not have any place where it is not right to get revenge. You should be able to cut his throat in the church. Revenge should have no bounds. But, good Laertes, will you do this? Keep close within your chamber. Hamlet returned shall know you've come home. We will put on, we, and by this he means I, the king, I will put on those shall praise your excellence and set a double varnish on the fame the Frenchman gave you, bring you in fine together and wager on your heads. I'll get some people to talk you up even more. Then I'll bring you together and wager on your heads. We will have a competition, you against him, and I'll put a bet on it. And it'll be sort of exciting and fun, right? I'll say, okay, well, let's gamble. Let's say, okay, if you win, you get this. If he wins, he gets that. It'll be fun. Now, fun? Sword fighting? Fun? With the guy who killed your father? Okay, I get that. That's a little unusual. If we turn it into boxing, it's a little less unusual, but it still is a little bizarre. But, it is Shakespeare. He does these things. He says, I want a fancy ending. So I'll use a fancy sport, something that is elaborate and dangerous. Fencing. Okay? So the king says, I'll have a wager on your heads. Okay? And he, Hamlet, being remiss, most generous, and free from all contriving, he will not peruse the foils, so that with ease or with a little shuffling you may choose a sword unbaited, and in the pass of practice requite him for your father. Now, unbaited means not dulled. A sword in a competition, or a rapier, in a dueling competition, a fencing competition, where it's just for fun, is dulled to prevent harm between the duelers. It's designed to be not dangerous. Well, you, Laertes, since you know what you're doing, you may choose a sword that isn't dull. We'll make sure there's a sharp sword in there. And you pick that one out. Then, in a passive practice, in one of the movements that you do to play in this game, you will requite him. You can get back at him for what he did to your father. Get back, revenge. There it is. There's the plan. He says, I will do it. And for that purpose, I'll anoint my sword. I will put some stuff on my sword to make sure it happens. You see, I bought an unction of a mountebank. An unction? I love unction of a mountebank. I have an unction of a mountebank, and it's really dangerous. An unction is like a liquid. He bought it from a criminal, and so it's poison. He says, I bought an unction of a mountebank so mortal that, but dip a knife in it, where it draws blood, no cataplasm so rare, collected under the moon, can save the thing from death, or collected from all the simples that have virtue under the moon, can save the thing from death, that is but scratched withal. I'll touch my point with this contagion, that if I gall him slightly, it may be death. If I just barely cut him with my sharp sword, it'll kill him, because it's poison. King Claudius says, let's think further on this. Weigh what convenience both of time and means may fit us to our shape. If this should fail, and that our drift look through our bad performance, 'twere better not essayed. If it looks like we planned this, it's better that we didn't do it in the first place. Therefore, this project should have a back or a second, which is actually at this point a third, that it might hold if this should blast in proof. Soft. Wait a minute. Remember, that means wait a minute. That doesn't mean go soft. It means progress slowly, softly. Let me think for a second. I can't move forward yet. Let me see. We'll make a solemn wager. I have it. When in your motion you're hot and dry, as make your bouts more violent to that end, and that he calls for a drink, I'll have prepared him a chalice for the nonce. I will have a glass ready for the occasion of him being thirsty and calling for a drink. Now, I would imagine that in this day and age, in the medieval times, rather than using Gatorade to quench their thirst when they're hot and sweaty, they just used, say wine. So, what he says is when he comes to the bench for a Gatorade, a wine aid, I'll give him wine that's poisoned. Whereon but sipping, if he by chance escape your venomed stuck, our purpose may hold there. If you don't poison him, I'll poison him. They're both nodding and winking, and in walks the queen. Okay, so here's the plan. He wants revenge on Hamlet for killing Polonius. Laertes and Hamlet will duel, just for fun. Laertes will have a sharp rapier. He will poison his rapier, and Claudius will poison the wine. It's like, we'll kill him 3 times. It'll be great. And in walks the queen. The king says, how now, sweet queen? The queen says, one woe doth tread upon another's heel. So fast they follow. Your sister's drowned, Laertes. Drowned? Oh, where? How did this happen? Okay, so the queen relates a strange story, but it fits with what we know of what was happening with Ophelia. She was babbling goofy. She was talking about flowers. She was telling dirty jokes. She was what we would call mad, right? She was not herself. Okay. Now, the queen says there's a willow that grows over this brook, grows aslant a brook, grows out over the brook, that shows his hoar leaves in the glassy stream. There, with fantastic garlands, did she come of crowflowers, nettles, daisies, and long purples that liberal shepherds give a grosser name, but our cold maids do dead men's fingers call them. So she came to this tree with a bunch of, woven flowers. There, on the pendant boughs, her coronet weeds clambering to hang, an envious sliver broke. Climbing the tree, a branch broke. Okay, so now, she's climbing over the brook. So when this branch broke, down her weedy trophies and herself fell into the weeping brook. Her clothes spread wide and mermaid-like. A while they bore her up, which time she tried to get out and escape. No, that's not what it says. She called for help and said, I'm drowning. No, that's not what she said either. In fact, what she did is she chanted snatches of old tunes as one incapable of her own distress, as though she was unable to understand the danger she was in. Okay, she did not help herself. Or she acted like a creature native and endued to that element, like as if she was a fish or a duck or something. She just floated there and babbled and sang until her clothes got all wet, and then her garments, heavy with their drink, pulled the poor wretch from her melodious lay to muddy death. Alas, then, she's drowned. Yes, she's drowned. Drowned. Okay. So, now, Laertes' father has been killed by Hamlet. Laertes' sister has been shunned by Hamlet and then gone mad because Hamlet killed their father, and now her madness has led to her death. Okay? Revenge is growing in Laertes. He says, too much water hast thou, poor Ophelia, and therefore I forbid my tears. I'm not going to cry for you because you just drowned. You have enough water. But yet It is our trick. Nature her custom holds. Let shame say what it will. So he cries anyway. But he says, when these are gone, the woman will be out. I'll have no more woman in me. I'll quit crying, and I'll be done. Adieu, my lord. I need to leave. I have a speech of fire that fain would blaze, but that this folly doubts it. I'm crying too much to talk fire, so he leaves the room. He runs away crying. Okay? The king says, Gertrude, let's go follow him. How much I had to do to calm his rage. Now fear I this will give it start again. Therefore let's follow. I just calmed him down. Now he's going to go mad again. But actually, that's a pretty good thing. That's a good thing for the king because he wants him to get his anger on and want to kill Hamlet. He wants him to want revenge. Here's a brief recap of what the queen said. And at the end of this scene, we're waiting for Laertes and Claudius to enact their revenge upon Hamlet. Well, the king is going to enact his murder by using Laertes, who wants revenge. Motivation for revenge is not healthy. Revenge, when it is prompted by someone who has ulterior motives, is not healthy. How is this revenge all driven? It's driven by love. Goodness. This sounds like Hamlet's situation. The difference is that now it's the time. Now is when Laertes is going to do this thing. He's not going to wait. This king has pushed Laertes hard enough that he's actually going to follow through right now.